In today's video, we're diving into 5 brutal shark attacks, from a surfer mistaken for prey in California to a diver's fatal encounter with an oceanic whitetip. But first, let's go to Florida, where a shark annihilated the Atonal family in 5 minutes. It was July 21st, 2024, in the lower Florida Keys. The morning light had just settled over the reef flats. The tide was slow, the air still, and the charter boats around the channel ran their engines at idle, unaware that a partially stunned tarpon was already drawing predators in from deeper water. The family, Ronan Atonal, his wife Maren, both 33, and their 9-year-old daughter Selby, had arrived on a rented skiff just after sunrise. Ronan, an architectural drafter from Atlanta, had planned the trip months earlier. Maren, a speech-language therapist, balanced his cautious habits with a calm confidence around the water. She had grown up swimming in lakes and believed their daughter should be comfortable in the ocean. This vacation was meant to be a simple break, a chance to snorkel, see parrotfish, and record underwater footage for a school project Selby was excited about. They chose a shallow reef close to the main channel, a spot recommended by the rental clerk for its clear water and low boat traffic. Ronan scanned the water briefly but saw nothing unusual. No fast currents, no dark shapes, no warnings from nearby vessels. Their choice to enter the water wasn't reckless. It was the natural result of calm conditions and years of predictable tourist snorkeling. However, none of them noticed the dispersing blood plume moving slowly with the incoming tide from the nearby charter boat's tarpon fight. Tarpon, nurse sharks, and barracuda often passed through these channels, but the most assertive predator in the region, the bull shark, was known for patrolling murky stretches, not clear shallows like this. However, late summer salinity shifts, and flat calm mornings sometimes pull large bulls into clearer water when bait fish gather over shallow structure. They can reach 11 feet and over 500 pounds, with a bite force suitable for crushing turtles. Their behavior is opportunistic, and they often key in on wounded prey. The last uneventful moments unfolded quietly. Ronan pointed out a cluster of yellowtail near the coral. Selby kicked gently. Staying close, Maren adjusted her daughter's snorkel. None of them saw the tarpon's drifting body, or the gray silhouette that rose from the deeper cut of the channel, moving with heavy, steady thrusts. The anglers later estimated the shark at 8 to 10 feet, thick-bodied, broad-headed, unmistakably a bull. It approached low, hidden by refracted light and silt stirred by the earlier fight. The strike on Ronan came from below and slightly behind. Witnesses described a sudden churn of white water and a deep splash, followed by a muffled sound that might have been the shark hitting bone. The bull shark drove upward with such force that Ronan's torso bent sharply as he was yanked sideways. His snorkel dropped from his mouth, and blood spread immediately in a widening halo. His legs spasmed once before he slipped under the surface. The anglers watching this unfold said that Maren reacted instantly, pulling Selby toward the boat's bowline, but the water around them had already changed color. She struggled to keep her footing with fins on, half swimming and half dragging her daughter. The blood from Ronan's injury mixed with the remaining tarpon trail, creating a concentrated scent that triggered the shark to strike again. This time, it rammed the stern of the Atonal's skiff, rocking it hard to one side. The impact forced Maren underwater briefly, causing her to lose grip on Selby for a moment. When she surfaced, she clutched her daughter again and pushed her forward. The second hit came fast. The bull shark turned through the clouded water and struck Maren's side, its jaws clamping from rib to hip. The angler saw her jerk backward violently, arms flinging outward. She tried to pull Selby up with one hand, but the force knocked the child loose. The shark dragged Maren under. Her legs kicked once, then stilled. Selby screamed for a moment, treading water near the boat's ladder. One of the anglers had already leapt into action, throwing a life ring and starting his engine, but distance and timing were against them. The water, thick with blood, masked movement beneath. When the shark rose again, it surfaced directly beneath the child, mouth wide, propelled by the scent. There was no thrashing or prolonged struggle, just a single upward surge and a rapid pull below, leaving only a brief splash and a widening patch of red. The anglers reached the Atonal's skiff within seconds of the final strike. They found no survivors, only drifting fins, a cracked snorkel mask, and the shaken boat rocking from the earlier collision. They radioed for emergency response, but by the time authorities arrived, evidence already pointed to a rapid, predatory sequence driven by the wounded tarpon and the shark's proximity. The Coast Guard recovered Ronan and Maren's remains later that morning, located separately along the channel edge. Selby was found the next day near a mangrove pocket 2 miles away. Officials described the injuries as consistent with multiple forceful bites and rapid submersion. A fisheries officer noted that the shark likely reverted to deep channel cruising once the stimulus faded, and it was never seen again. In the days that followed, local agencies issued a brief safety statement. The reef site remained open, though warning placards were updated to include feeding-related risk conditions. The Atonal's extended family flew in from New Zealand for private memorials, struggling to reconcile the sudden loss. They quietly handled arrangements while avoiding media attention. Yet even as the Atonal's deaths highlighted the ocean's unforgiving danger, in Northern California, a surfer would paddle into the murky break completely unaware that a massive great white was already circling beneath him. It was June 4th, 2016, along a fog-heavy stretch of the Northern California coast. The break was quiet, the water flattened by morning tide, and the visibility poor enough that even nearby figures were reduced to silhouettes. Arvik Sloan, 29, had driven up from Petaluma before dawn to surf, a habit he kept even on days when conditions were marginal. He worked as a cabinetry finisher for a small custom shop and was known for taking solitary morning sessions before his shifts. To him, fog meant fewer people and cleaner shoulders. His choices were predictable for someone experienced, but inclined to treat warning signs as inconveniences rather than risks. Arvik's reputation among local surfers was that of a quiet regular who didn't exaggerate his skills, but also didn't back down from difficult water. He kept his gear in meticulous shape, waxed his board evenly, checked his leash every time, and kept a mental log of currents. That morning, he intended to test a new wetsuit and get a few long rides on the outer left shoulder, likely before the wind picked up. Before paddling out, Arvik walked past a sign noting recent shark activity. Two surfers exiting the water mentioned that the visibility had dropped in the last half hour. Arvik brushed off the warnings, saying he would stay farther outside the main cluster to avoid accidentally drifting into someone. He did not consider that going farther out in fog placed him in deeper, seal-dense hunting lanes, conditions that increase ambush probability. Once Arvik paddled past the inner break, the fog thickened enough that he lost sight of the beach. He paused to listen, hearing faint barks of harbor seals somewhere to his south seals, all out on near-shore rocks in that region, and fog often pushes them into the water earlier than usual. He considered shifting back toward the group, but decided he had already committed to the outer shoulder. Great white sharks frequent Northern California for one reason: seals. Adults can reach over 15 feet and more than 2,000 pounds, with a bite force capable of crushing bone in a single strike. They hunt by ambush, rising from below in low visibility conditions to target silhouettes at the surface. Morning fog, in particular, is cited in multiple incident reports as a contributing factor in mistaken identity strikes. A nearby surfer later reported hearing a single sharp splash out of rhythm with the waves. The water around Arvik churned, followed by a deep, percussive thud, heavy enough that the witness felt it through his board. The shark hit from directly below, lifting Arvik slightly before the force dragged him down. The strike tore into his torso, the teeth creating a wide arc of tissue damage, later determined to be consistent with a large adult white. The bite width, aligned with a shark, estimated between 14 and 16 feet, typical for the region's seasonal aggregations. Arvik's board shot upward as the leash snapped under tension. The shark released him briefly, a common behavior when a shark registers an object as non-prey after the initial strike. Witnesses saw his body rise just under the surface, limp, before the shark surged again from the side. The second bite clamped onto his hip and lower back. Two surfers paddled hard toward him, shouting for others to call for help. The visibility forced them to follow the red spreading trail rather than his form. One caught a glimpse of the shark's tail fin, cutting a line beneath the surface before disappearing into the murk. The water around Arvik rolled in small, irregular pulses, the last sign of movement before everything went still. When the first rescuer reached him, Arvik was floating face down, his wetsuit torn open across the chest and side. The wounds were catastrophic, with exposed bone and heavy arterial bleeding clouding the water. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but their assessment was immediate. The trauma had destroyed major vessels and compromised vital organs. They stated that the strike was likely unsurvivable from the moment of impact. The beach was closed for 24 hours, though no additional shark activity was observed. Wildlife officials inspected Arvik's board and the wounds, concluding that the attacker was likely a large adult great white feeding in shallow channels influenced by fog and seal movement. This matched ongoing seasonal tracking data for the area. Arvik's family kept kept details private, issuing only a short statement requesting privacy. Local surfers left flowers near the trailhead, noting that the conditions had given every warning possible. This tragedy highlighted the deadly consequences of mistaken identity in murky waters. And in South Africa, a swimmer would push into deep water channels, unaware that nature's fastest shark was closing in. It was March 3rd, 2018, several miles off the KwaZulu-Natal coast of South Africa. The water looked calm from a distance, but the deep channel beneath carried a steady pull that seasoned ocean swimmers recognized as both useful and dangerous. Tarek Milner, 36, had traveled from Colorado to train for an international ultra-distance ocean swim event. Colleagues said he preferred solo endurance training because it gave him a sense of control that structured pool work never did. His motivation for the trip was straightforward: test himself in long, uninterrupted open water that behaved nothing like inland lakes. He aimed to complete a full 8-mile ocean training segment, something he believed would give him an edge in competition. Tarek studied tide charts, checked wind patterns, and verified current strength with his support kayaker, a local guide named Bryn Halland. He wanted to hold a steady pace for the first hour and use the deep water section to measure his fatigue curve. His decisions were understandable for someone with endurance experience, but he underestimated how quickly predators could move through the channels beyond the nets. Bryn later said that this particular training zone was not commonly used by swimmers due to deep pelagic traffic, something Tarek dismissed as manageable. The horizon dissolved into a pale smear of light as swells rose and fell, creating rolling walls that blocked visibility every few seconds. Shortfin mako sharks patrol offshore channels at speeds exceeding 40 miles per hour, with streamlined bodies and long snouts built for rapid acceleration. They strike by targeting movement at the surface, often mistaking swimmers for injured fish. Their jaws can exert several hundred pounds of force, with teeth designed to shear rather than crush. In low visibility conditions, reflective wetsuit panels or flutter kicks can be misinterpreted as prey movement. A dive boat at the harbor mentioned spotting a fast-moving shark earlier that morning. The warning never reached Bryn or Tarek. Unaware of the danger, Tarek tightened the straps on his goggles and said he would stay visible next to the kayak. He believed his bright swim cap, paced breathing, and predictable strokes reduced the risk. Bryn watched him stretch, noting the small but persistent chop forming on the water. They paddled out past the last buoy line. Tarek entered the water smoothly, began his stroke rhythm, keeping within 15 feet of the kayak. The visibility under the surface was limited, with particles suspended in the water creating shifting shadows. About 20 minutes in, Bryn heard a faint scattering noise on his left, a sound baitfish make when something large moves beneath them. He called to Tarek to pause, but the swimmer kept his rhythm, focused on reaching the 1-mile marker on his GPS tracker. First indication of the strike came from the water itself. Bryn saw a sudden plume erupt around Tarek, vertical burst of foam and red mixing at the surface. The impact lifted the swimmer partially out of the water, his body arching as if slammed from below by a force no human could resist. The sound was not a splash, but a hard, blunt concussion. The mako hit him from the right side, tearing deeply into his torso. Due to its speed, the shark's momentum carried it several feet past Tarek. Before it twisted sharply and re-engaged, Bryn saw the tail flick in a tight arc, sending vibrations across the surface. Tarek's arm lifted reflexively, but the movement was uncoordinated, likely more a reaction to force than an intentional motion. The shark clamped again onto his midsection, jerking him downward in a short, violent drag. Witnesses on a returning fishing charter, still over 200 yards away, reported seeing a brief movement beneath the surface, and a body pulled below for a moment before resurfacing limp. The mako released him after the second bite, typical behavior when the initial hit determines the prey is not a fish target. Bryn paddled hard into the blood-mixed water. Tarek floated on his back, his wetsuit torn open from ribcage to hip. The injuries were catastrophic, with deep shearing lacerations exposing bone and soft tissue, and the blood loss was immediate and heavy. Bryn pulled him alongside the kayak, looping an arm under his shoulders in an attempt to stabilize him. The swimmer made no sound, no voluntary movement. A third disturbance appeared under the surface, a dark streak that passed within feet of Bryn's kayak. He froze, gripping the edge of the boat to keep balance as the water pulsed below. The shark did not strike again, but its presence made movement toward shore slow and cautious. Bryn began towing Tarek, kicking and paddling with uneven bursts, eyes scanning the swell swells for more shadows. The tow back to the responding vessel took roughly 7 minutes, a pace Bryn later described as the fastest he could manage without capsizing. It took nearly 10 minutes to reach the first responding rescue boat, which had been radioed by the fishing charter. By then, Tarek showed no sign of respiration. Medics pulled him aboard and began basic assessment. The extent of the trauma made the conclusion immediate. Force and depth of the initial strike had destroyed vital organs and vessels, killing him. Officials later examined Tarek's gear and the wound patterns, concluding that the Mako had been a large adult, likely drawn into the channel by increased baitfish activity. The Coastal Authority released a brief report, issuing a general advisory to open water users not to train beyond protective zones. During periods of high pelagic movement, Bryn was left deeply shaken, both physically and mentally, after the attack. In the days following, he underwent evaluation by local authorities and trauma counselors. He took a year-long leave from guiding and competitive support duties. However, even as a swimmer's pursuit in open waters ended in tragedy in Australia, a kayaker would drift unknowingly over a dense bait ball, his plastic vessel about to become a launching pad into waters where bronze whalers and dusky sharks waited below. It was May 18, 2015, off the coast of Western Australia, where the swells rolled in long, even lines beneath a gray morning sky. The sea felt strangely quiet despite the rhythmic movement, the kind of subdued surface that hid far more activity beneath than above. The kayaker, Soren Browning, 34, had come from Minnesota after saving for years to complete a self-planned marine wildlife film project. He worked as a freelance videographer, known for steady, methodical work rather than artistic flair. For this trip in Australia, he wanted to capture high-resolution footage of dolphin behavior in open water for a conservation group that had commissioned a short educational reel. Soren believed that staying near the surface, remaining predictable, and keeping distance from active feeding zones reduced danger to near zero. His choice to follow a pod of dolphins offshore made sense for his project, but he underestimated how rapidly feeding conditions could change and the presence of larger predators lurking below. Bronze whalers can exceed 10 feet in length and often patrol coastal regions where baitfish gather, using bursts of acceleration to investigate disturbances. Dusky sharks, larger and heavier, sometimes reaching 12 feet, tend to move selectively around active feeding zones, attacking silhouettes at the surface when prey activity triggers an opportunistic response. Both species rely on movement cues and can be drawn in by dense bait balls, especially when dolphins drive fish upward. Both species are generally cautious around human-sized objects, but may investigate violently if surface commotion mimics prey behavior. Soren's hydrophone had picked up rapid clicking patterns from dolphins the previous day, a sign they were hunting intensively. He continued toward them, believing that maintaining a distance of 30 to 40 yards would keep him clear of danger. He filmed steadily, his kayak drifting with the swell. About 40 minutes in, the dolphins changed direction abruptly, their movements becoming sharper as they circled a patch of rippling water ahead. Small fish began leaping at the surface. Soren kept his position, aiming his camera at the disturbance. What he did not see was the bait ball forming beneath him, a dense sphere of fish driven upward. His kayak drifted directly over it in under a minute. The first impact sounded like a muffled crack against the hull, jolting the kayak sideways. Soren braced instinctively, but a second ram from below tilted the craft sharply. Witnesses on a charter boat roughly 300 yards away saw the kayak pitch upward at a steep angle before rolling completely. Bronze whaler's strike flipped him cleanly, sending him into the water with his legs splaying outward as he surfaced. The initial strike likely served as a non-predatory investigative bump rather than a feeding attempt. He gasped once, sharp intake caught on his GoPro audio, followed by the heavy slap of his displaced kayak hitting the water beside him. The whaler circled beneath, but it did not attack. The turbulence of the baitfish kept it moving erratically. Soren struggled to right the kayak, grabbing its edge, his movements fast and uneven, exactly the type of surface disturbance that attracts attention during feeding activity. From the charter boat, two passengers saw a long, dark shape pass beneath him in a smooth arc. The dusky shark approached from deeper water, drawn by the thrashing and the bait ball dispersing from the earlier collision. It surfaced in a swift vertical angle, striking Soren from behind just as he attempted to climb onto his overturned kayak. The The bite locked onto his right thigh and hip, pulling him sideways and down. The shark shook once, an efficient, controlled motion. Before releasing and circling again, Soren's leg showed massive tearing. The injuries were consistent with a single large shark bite, rather than repeated predatory feeding, which usually involves repeated head shakes. He tried to push himself upward, one arm gripping the kayak, but his movements weakened rapidly. The Dusky made a second pass, this time seizing him around the lower back. The motion dragged him below the surface again for several seconds. When he resurfaced, his torso twisted unnaturally, and his arm slipped from the kayak's edge. The shark did not return for a third strike. The bronze whaler made a brief investigative sweep, bumping his body from beneath, but did not engage further. Soren drifted half-submerged, unresponsive, his life vest keeping him partially afloat despite extensive trauma. The charter boat crew radioed for emergency services while maneuvering closer, but the distance and cautious approach required in the presence of sharks slowed them. By the time they reached him, Soren showed no respirations or voluntary movement. They pulled him aboard with a gaff hook secured through his vest to avoid placing hands in the water. Medics confirmed that the injuries included massive soft tissue trauma and severed major vessels, unsurvivable in minutes without immediate surgical intervention. Marine authorities later reviewed footage and the witness accounts, concluding that the baitball formation directly beneath the kayak triggered both shark approaches. The initial impact from the bronze whaler created enough chaos to draw the Dusky into the zone. Soren's equipment was recovered and returned to his family. His project files were mostly intact. A brief notice circulated among regional film groups, and the Coastal Management Office issued a reminder to avoid drifting over feeding activity, noting the unpredictability of shark behavior during high-density baitfish events. The kayaker's innocent dolphin filming session turned deadly when predators lurked beneath the baitball. And that same year in the Red Sea, the exploration of an ancient shipwreck would unknowingly disturb a resting territorial oceanic white-tip. It was May 18, 2015, off the Sinai Peninsula in the Red Sea. The water was calm, unusually clear for that season. From the deck of the dive boat, nothing suggested danger, but the faint current shift, suspended silt, and the quiet absence of usual schooling fish in the area hinted the environment could change quickly. Arlen Myro was a 34-year-old marine equipment technician known among colleagues for his cautious planning. He specialized in underwater survey systems for a research company. This particular trip, however, he took for himself. He had long wanted to film the remains of a 1950s freighter resting near a popular drop point and hoped to capture footage to submit to a regional marine archive. Arlen arrived 2 days earlier at a small dive-focused lodge, planning to document the hull before further decay. Despite scattered pelagic sightings, his dive seemed reasonable for an experienced diver, and he carried standard safety gear, including a redundant regulator and dive computer. The wreck's waters were muted blue, with Anthias darting among broken plates and shadowed cargo holds below. Oceanic white-tip sharks were historically present in the Red Sea, but are generally uncommon near popular wrecks and rarely aggressive toward divers unless provoked. Typically measuring 9 to 13 feet with broad pectoral fins, they will sometimes react defensively to sudden intrusion or bright lights in tight spaces. Arlen proceeded with his plan, preferring to begin filming in the quieter morning window. His dive partner, a French hobbyist named Luc Bravant, noted in later interviews that Arlen seemed entirely at ease, focused on capturing clean footage. Once in the water, the pair descended along the mooring line, settling near the freighter's bow at around 82 feet. Arlen adjusted his lighting several times, cutting through the dim interior of the forward corridor. Out of nowhere, an oceanic white-tip surged from the recess with sudden acceleration. Luke later reported no circling or investigation, just an abrupt movement. While adult white-tips generally react defensively rather than hunting divers, the shark had been resting in the shaded hold and was startled when Arlen's lights swept too close. Its first motion was a fast, direct lunge, powered by a strong tail thrust. The animal closed the distance within seconds, and Arlen only registered it as a dark mass in his peripheral vision. The impact was violent and immediate. Arlen collided with protruding wreckage, which likely caused the most severe trauma. The shark may have made contact, but did not bite with the force or intent described in other oceanic white-tip incidents. The strike drove Arlen sideways into the rusted wall, and his regulator briefly slipped from his mouth as his camera rig spun away. The shark's jaws clamped along his upper arm and shoulder, likely a brief investigative nip. rather than a full clamp. Arlen attempted to bring his right hand to his inflator hose, but most tissue damage resulted from impact with jagged wreckage and secondary blunt trauma. The water clouded within seconds. Luke moved toward him, but hesitated when the shark released and circled tightly, its broad fins cutting slow arcs. The animal bumped Arlen's sinking body once more, nudging him downward before moving off into the gloom. Luke reached Arlen and tried to stabilize him, but the injury was grim. His regulator hung loose, and his left side was unresponsive. Luke secured the inflator and began a controlled ascent, pushing Arlen upward. At around 40 feet, he realized Arlen had no remaining muscle tension and was losing blood rapidly into the current. The crew hauled both men aboard. The captain radioed the nearest Coast Guard post within minutes. A patrol boat was already on routine sweep nearby and diverted toward them. The crew transferred Arlen aboard, where Coast Guard medics performed a rapid assessment, but the trauma was already fatal. Post-mortem analysis would likely show blunt force trauma and lacerations consistent with wreck entanglement. Authorities documented the equipment, Arlen's camera rig, and the torn section of his wetsuit. The footage from his camera showed only the last stable seconds before the strike. Quiet corridor, the faint motion of silt, and then a rapidly approaching blur before the image collapsed. His family requested the video not be released. His body was flown home within the week. A brief memorial was held by his company, attended by technicians who had worked with him for years. Thanks for watching. If you liked these stories, click here.